All right, nice to see everyone. I'm gonna call the meeting to order at 6:31. Welcome. Up first, we have our consent agenda. We have our prior minutes from September 4th, and we have a few first read policies. Any discussion about those in the consent agenda in general? So I'll make a motion to approve, and we'll do that by roll. Miranda. Lynn, any need to reprioritize the agenda tonight?
I have one executive session that we could push until the end.
Yeah, we could do that. We could, okay to let others leave, and then we'll do the executive then?
It's under personnel.
Okay, perfect, great. Okay, and doesn't look like we, yes, we have one visitor here in person, and anyone online on the Zoom, Courtney?
No.
Okay, and are you here for public comment?
She's here for me.
Yeah.
Oh, so part of the
She's
spotlight.
gonna help me.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so then doesn't look like we have anyone for public comment. So, right, that brings us to you, Kevin, with your spotlight.
Pretty quick. Court, you got it?
Yep. I won't touch it.
Just want to give out hand out some stuff that we're going to be talking about real quick. So, let's quickly just talk a little bit about the school year and how it's been going so far. We came to the in-service this year, and pretty excited. We really a great in-service. One of the first things we did was we talked about what do we believe as a school, and kind of our guiding principles for the next handful of years. And so we came up with these 4 belief statements. And so whenever we have a staff meeting, these are brought out. We actually, when we first had them, we were all reading them, and it sounded almost like we were at church. But so I'm now reading them out loud. So we believe in a school where all community members model empathy and kindness. We believe all students can achieve growth through perseverance. We believe in equitable practices that support the belonging of all community members. And we believe a safe and consistent school creates a joyful and peaceful environment. And I can't imagine there's anyone that would disagree that this would be a fantastic place to be at, right? So we, as a school, go back to these all the time. And what I say to them at every staff meeting is, we're not here yet, but this is where we're striving towards. We always want to strive towards this, raise that bar up. We also have our mission, and our mission is to ensure that all students learn at grade level or higher, and that word ensure is super important. We have to ensure. We have to do whatever it takes in order to make sure that every single one of our students is learning at grade level or higher. And that's in front of you. But I just wanted to bring this out just to remind you, I'm sure you've seen it before, but just to remind you of the different tiers, the different levels that we have here in FNESU. So as you can see, under tier 1, in level 1 and 2, it's really about the classroom teacher and what's going on with them, right? And so we want to make sure that we're providing, when we're giving our instruction, we're doing the best we possibly can using research, using best practices to make sure that every single one of our kids gets what they're getting. In level 2, it talks about double dosing. That's a word that this district uses a lot, double dose, double dose, double dose. And what that means is we're giving the kids grade level essentials that they might not have gotten the first time around. So we're going to give it to them double, or maybe the second time, or we're going to give it triple. Like, we're going to make sure that those kids get that, ensure that. Level 3 and level 4, now we're talking about what we call, and I think most of us call win blocks. What do I need? And so in there, we're looking at targeted interventions. We're making sure that we're hitting all those priority standards. EST would be level 4A, and then we start talking about IEPs as we get up into level. But today we're going to specifically talk mostly around level 2 and level 3. Court.
Okay, hold on. Try.
There we are. So, like all of us, we function as professional learning communities, right? So, all of our schools are doing the same work. Here, it's not something that we go and do. We don't go to a professional learning community meeting. We behave in a professional learning community. So up here, it tells you it's who we are, it's what we do, it's how we collaborate. That's when we talk about a professional learning community. We have a focus on learning inside, while we're talking as professional learning communities, that it's a learning for not only the students, but also the teachers. So when we sit down and we're collaborating about the right thing, and the analogy that I gave to the staff was when we have a science meeting, we're not wondering who's buying the chicken wings for the dissection. That's not going to improve student outcomes to focus on learning. We want to make sure that when we're having these conversations that we're collaborating about the right thing. We're looking at data and making decisions around that, and that we're constantly focused on results. I was just in a K-1-2 meeting last week and again this week, so I meet with them every single week, and in front of us is the screen, all the data about how kids are doing and what are we going to do to meet those needs. It's constantly in the forefront of what we're talking about. I sat in the SST yesterday, the student support team, after school. It was like, I don't know why we were in there, but that's where everyone went. And so we're sitting in there after school, and a few teachers are on the ground, I was sitting on a desk, and we were talking about data. It's like, that's just they want. They're like, yeah, I don't know how we're going to make sure these kids all get that. I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, this is so awesome. So it wasn't a professional learning community meeting. It was us behaving in a professional learning community, even after school, sitting in the SST. It was absolutely beautiful. You can do it. In these professional learning, what does that really mean? It means we're talking about these 4 questions, and these 4 questions come up every single time. What do we want all students to know and to be able to do? This district has spent, I'm sure, a great deal of time, as a district that I came from, figuring out exactly what that means. What does it mean? What do we want all 2nd graders, 3rd graders, 4th graders, 5th graders, what do we want them to be able to know and to be able to do by the time they end that grade? We also want to know, how do they get there? So we have to have the right assessments. We want to know, now that we know that they can't do it, what are we going to do to make sure that they can do it? And how are we going to extend for those students that actually get it? In 5th grade, there are 19 Common Core math standards. It would take you forever to cover 19 Common Core standards. Like every district, this district has chosen priority standards. We are going to guarantee that every single 5th grader has these 5 priority standards. We're going to make sure, because 19 is way too many. In 19, if you think about we'll just say we have 180 school days. Within that, we have a kid who's sick 10 days. In that, we have a field trip. In that, we have vacations. In that, we have snow days. In that, we have all these things. Next thing you know, we didn't have 180 days. We have 160 days to try to cover 19 standards. That's nearly impossible. So what we've done as a district is we have these 5 priority standards. We're going to make sure that every single kid gets those. Now, do we touch upon the others? Absolutely, but we want to guarantee that every single 5th grader comes out with those priority standards. Okay, and they look a lot like this. So these are the 5 standards that there are for 5th grade. These are the priority standards. The district also has done a nice job of, before my time here, that's why I say the district, but before my time here, of putting in there, how are we going to extend them? So the priority standards on the curriculum site, if you were to look at it, has the 5 priority standards and then the next that you can kind of tackle. Because it's not about going to the next grade level, 6th grade, it's about going deeper into these so you really truly got it. Okay, so I'll just quickly just show, so just add and subtract fractions unlike denominators, solve word problems with adding and subtracting of fractions, apply and extend previous understandings of multiplication and multiply a fraction. Fractions are big, 5th grade. Solve real world problems using multiplication of fractions, mixed numbers, and apply and extend previous understandings of division and divide unit fractions by whole numbers. So that's what they really want to make sure that you get. Okay, Cor? I think I'm in the right, I'm trying to remember my own path here. So how do we get there? We have different types of assessments in order so we can find out if these kids truly have what they have, if they truly got what we wanted them to get. So we have the first question, which was, what do we want all students to be able to know and do? Did it. Now we're going to assess them. We have different ways to assess.
I do the physical and autopsy. I did it during in-service, and I'll do it quickly here, and everybody was like, oh. But you don't wait to an autopsy to figure out what was wrong, right? We don't wait to the summatives. We don't wait to the end of the unit assessment. We don't wait to a midterm exam. We don't wait to a final exam to know what a kid has missed. So we do physicals. We have constant formative assessments. We might be doing exit cards. We might be just doing walk-arounds. We might be doing simple looking at homework. We might be able to figure out exactly what these kids need. So we don't wait to the end. Matter of fact, it's not even surprising when we get to the end. I could guarantee if I was looking at my students periodically throughout their time, I could with almost 100% certainty tell you how they're going to do on their summative assessment. Because I've done enough physicals or I've done enough assessments along the way to get me there. What's really cool, again, in this district, is you have a couple of common formative assessments that are being done as a district level, so we can have conversations across the schools, which is fantastic. We're doing some common assessments here as well, so that we can start understanding what does it mean when we say a second grader? What does that really look like? What does it mean we have an 8th grader? What does that really look like? What does that work look like? One of them is an interim writing assessment. This is for your reading, language, arts side, right? Interim writing assessment. We looked at it this past, I don't know, three weeks ago maybe. Laurel and I brought it down. We were looking at it, getting it ready because we were taking it right now. And it kind of hit us in the face that it's going to be tough for our kids. It's going to be really tough. Why? There could be lots of things. One of the things is that we got to get our kids ready and prepared for this. So now we know it's there. This is the first time taking it. So now we know where that benchmark is, which is really important. So we can strive towards it. And the high leverage assessment is a math one. And the kids were doing it, actually they were doing it the last couple of days. I could hear them groan, but I could hear them. And again, same thing, they're working hard. The best part is they're taking that October 10th when we have our SU, and they're gonna be looking at it as a collective group. So 6th grade teachers will all be able to take that high leverage assessment that everybody in our district has taken and have that conversation. They can look at it and say, oh my God, how did they get it in Berkshire? But in Bakersfield, we didn't get it. What did you do? We gotta know, because we wanna be that good. And of course, they looked at Sheldon's and it was the same as Berkshire's. So, all right, Court. In our district, we also have an assessment that we have a benchmark assessment that we take 3 times a year. It can also be used for progress monitoring and also be used to support us in how we collect our data for our WIN groups. It's a STAR assessment. Okay, we just gave it over the last week. I wanted to wait as long as we could in the school year. That's what you see sitting in front of you. If you look at, I think it's this page here. Can I just steal this for a second?
Absolutely.
If you just open it up to the second page of math, it's broken out for you. You can look at this at your own leisure. It's 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and then 5th, 6th, 7th, and then 8th is on the very back of its own page. But if you look at the 5th grade math, you know, what I noticed is a couple of things. I noticed that from last year fall to this year fall, it really has changed. I noticed from last year fall, there were a significant number of students that were below, as it says here in red. And I noticed that in the beginning of this year, there were much less below in red. I noticed that my greens grew greater. I noticed that my yellows grew greater. Our goal is to get these kids as high as we possibly can to get them proficient. We do that through this use of our WIN blocks. This paper here is what STAR spits out for us and supports us in how we are looking and doing our WIN blocks. This is a student that we have. He's currently in 6th grade. If you look at that line, you can see in the top his most recent test shows him in the yellow. You see that? You see him in the yellow. And then the projected is if we were to give him intervention, by the end of the school year, he'll be in the blue. The goal, of course, is to get all of our kids up in that blue, and that's what we're striving for. This also tells us on the bottom, if you were to look, what are some skill areas that would make the most sense for us to look at? And it aligns perfectly with what we talked about earlier, adding and subtracting fractions. Remember when those priority standards are beautiful for interventionists like Lorelei here, because as she's working with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders that are missing a priority standard from 4th, 5th, 4th, 6th, whatever grade, below 2 grade levels, maybe 3 grade levels, she knows exactly what to work on, those priority standards, and it aligns perfectly with this STAR assessment. So now she can go back, and we go back, and she can talk a little bit about it, holding these meetings and saying, okay, what do we got here? What are the kids we need? We gotta have these kids here. We gotta be able to pull these kids, and we got 6 kids that need this. Let's work with these 6 kids for the next 4 weeks, make sure we get it hard. Let's make sure that we have these 12 kids over here. We're gonna extend their learning. They're gonna go down and they're gonna work with maybe in this room in science on something else. But we're gonna make sure we put the best people we possibly can with the kids that need the most, and we're gonna make sure we give them those priority standards so that we can get them caught up. Court?
It takes a second, sorry.
You can hit it one more. This is where we are, okay? I'm not going to sugarcoat it. To me, it's where we are. We want every single kid. These are all little bobcats, okay? They're our little bobcats. These are all kids. These are all kids. This is math for this fall time. This is the number of students that were distinguished. These are the ones that are meeting. If you look on that chart, you got your blocks. This is 3rd through 8th grade. These are the kids that are nearly there. These are the kids that are below. We got some work to do. As I said to my family, oh my God, I've only been here a couple of weeks and I feel like I'm married to them, I guess. To my families here, there isn't a family that wants their kid down here. So we gotta do whatever it takes to get those kids up here. And I even said to them, put your own kid down here. What would you do to get your kid up here? And the answer is whatever it took. And that's what we're doing. We're gonna do whatever it takes to make sure that we get every single kid above this line. Because we have a commitment, we're ensuring that all kids are going to be above that line. They're going to have access and they're going to be grade level higher. That's what we want to do. Court, this is our literacy. Looks very similar. Looks very similar. Okay? Hit it. Hattie's research. John Hattie, famous gentleman, tons of research. He researched over 80,000 people and figured out exactly what works and doesn't work for education. Things that work, RTI, teacher efficacy, professional learning communities. Things that don't work, small class sizes, don't work. Okay? What do work is the stuff that we're doing. A typical student in a growth of a year grows 1.5 to 4.0 standard deviation. That's your average typical person. Okay? A child who comes from a middle class or higher is 0.57. So without even trying, there's already a gap that's growing. And that's a really sad thing. So without even trying, a kid who has middle class or upper class has 17.17 higher than even the best, and 40 points standard deviation higher than down here. So I just think to myself, how do we have to close that gap? The answer is right here is our response intervention or instruction / MTSS, multi-tiered system of supports. It says that if we do it and we do it 5 days a week and we do it right and we focus on the right thing, that we will actually have a 1.7 standard deviation growth for every single one of our students. What does that mean? It's twice as powerful as not providing it to them. What does it mean? It means that a student can grow, not 1, but can grow 2 to 3 years in a year. Because we're going to backfill the stuff that they have missed. We have to do it. Our students deserve it. Our families deserve it. Our high school deserves it. Our community deserves it. They need that. So that's what we're working on this year, and we're really working hard at how we're doing that. I think, what are some pitfalls? And then Lorelai's going to talk a little bit about just win blocks and what does that look like. If we did not have a guaranteed and viable curriculum, would be a problem. We have one. This district has worked super hard over the last handful of years to get us one. It's beautiful, it's in place, it sits there, it has the do's, has the no's, it's got it, it's there. We gotta use it, and we gotta use it all the time, but it's there. RTI, MTSS, however you wanna say it, is not a means towards special ed. That's not what it's meant for. It's meant so that we can support students and give them exactly what they need. Using mismatched or misused assessments, if we don't dig deep enough, we won't know exactly what the kids need. So we can't use an assessment that's just, well, I think you got it, I think you don't, so you're gonna work over here. We have to have data, true data, so that we can have the right assessments to make it work. We gotta make sure that when we're doing intervention, we're actually doing the right intervention. We can't be wasting our time doing a different intervention. You know, one of the things that I want to make sure is that we use our time and we use it right. We got 30 minutes twice a day for intervention. We got to make sure we're doing the right thing. It's not a time to go in and watch a video. It's not a time to go in and play a game. It's not a time to play apples and apples because my gosh, we love it. It's not a time because we've been having intervention 4 days that we're going to take the 5th day off. If all those down here were here, take the day off. But we aren't. We got some ways to go. Okay, focusing in on excuses rather than on things that we can't control. Had a conversation with the staff as we were looking at data for the first time here. And I said to them, I don't care if the kid's in foster care. I don't care if they have a bad home life. I don't care if the father and mother are having fights. All those are excuses as to what we need to do. Of course I care, but I don't, in terms of, we gotta move these kids. Don't use that as an excuse to keep a kid below grade level. We're not dumbing down anything. We're gonna meet those kids and we're gonna push them and push them, okay? And we have to have an assumption that every single kid can do it. We cannot go in there with the idea that, well, this kid has a really, it's 80 IQ. Going to give them 80 IQ work. No. We got to make sure that we're giving those kids the best that we possibly can. All kids. We have to. So we can't use things like a cognitive ability or their environmental conditions as excuses as to why they can't do it. They got to be able to do it. Courtney, I'm going to let Lorelai talk a little bit. I'll let her talk. But this is Lorelai Westbrook.
Right.
Lorelai is one of our math interventionists here. She's one of one. Actually, I would say there's a bunch. Even our reading interventionist today went to OGAP training because she's getting for some math training because we realized that you need both. So our reading interventionist is also becoming smarter around what we can do for math. And so anyway, so Lorelai is our #1 rated interventionist in Bakersfield, and she also is incredibly focused and data driven, which I really appreciate. Having conversations with her have been enlightening, and it's been a lot of fun. And what I like the most, I think, about Lorelai is she's not one of the excuses people. She's like, we got this, Kevin. We can do this. We got to get these kids in here. And I got it. We got it. We can do this. So it's really cool to see. So Lorelai.
All right. So, like Kevin said.
You're not going to stand up.
Can I sit?
You can
Okay,
sit.
Thank you.
The camera will follow you right to that spot.
Yeah, if I stand, I'll sweat and get stressed out. Okay, so like Kevin said, we have this awesome new curriculum, the literacy curriculum. But what we found was that it's so intensely at grade level, and our students are not, that they are like 7th and 8th graders are having a hard time accessing the curricular material because they have a lot of gaps. So I think we've seen it with Bridges, and not that our math scores are reflecting that right now, but kids who have been in Bridges for many years have the language, they know the routines, they are building on the knowledge. In literacy this year, since it's a brand new curriculum, I think we're gonna see more growth in a few years once kids have been in the curriculum for a few years and have less holes. But for Win 1, right now which is our double dosing block, in the lower grades, they are using it as in like the K4 grades, they're using that Win 1 time as a small group reteach. So like the classroom teacher will pull kids who maybe had math that morning and were like, they were not on target. So we're gonna pull these 5 kids, reteach what we did in math class today so it's fresh. The other kids are maybe making a win choice or reading, silent reading. We're really trying to up the silent reading around here, or the reading rigor. In 5-8, we were really trying to figure out a way to fluidly move kids in real time based on what we were seeing in classes. We have not gotten there yet, so what we've done is, like, grade 5 has math for Win 1 on Mondays. On Wednesdays, grade 6 has math for Win 1. Grade 7 has math on Thursday. So they're alternating their core classes throughout the week, so they have an extra session to say like, oh, Monday's lesson on, area of prisms was like, it went over most kids' heads, so we were gonna do a reteach of volume of prisms. So that's been working great. It does mean that, if you see a 5th grade class on Monday and they're missing things on Wednesday, Thursday, you're waiting until next Monday. We have not figured out a fluid way to do that quite yet, but that was a good compromise for the first chunk of intervention. Win Block 2, we have actually in middle school, I think 12 adults who are available during this time, which has been incredible. Our music teacher, Allie Brown, is doing a readers theater group for kids who are proficient or distinguished. So they are doing something that is still literacy based, but is fun and enriching for those kids who are where they need to be. And then the core classroom teachers and myself have split up the other kids based on the skills that they need. And this is a really nice example. The star printout here is I have these for all kids in math and literacy. And the focus skills, so this student is a 6th grade student. As you can see, all of his focus skills are 5th grade. Fractions, decimals. So I've gone through for all the math kids so far and figured out common focus skills that they need, and I'm grouping them that way for our next round of intervention. We're noticing a lot of fact fluency popping up. I think there was 20 kids in the entire middle school who that was their top focus skill, was multiplication and division fact fluency. And that's something that can improve basically all of their, any questions that they're required to compute without a calculator. So we're gonna have a fact fluency group next round.
Can you explain what a round is?
Okay, so a round of intervention. So Win Block 1 went from September 3rd until next Wednesday before the long weekend. So it was roughly 6 weeks of time. And so we are now taking the fall STAR data, looking at the focus skills, and remaking groups. So I had a group of 6 kids this time that were focusing on equivalency and fractions. Next time, some of them were like, great, fractions, we're gonna move on to adding and subtracting fractions or unit fractions, while some of them who got it are going on to maybe a literacy group based on what their needs were. We are still working on how to kind of balance the literacy and math, because as many of you know, a large percentage of kids who are not proficient in math are also not proficient in literacy. So we are trying to balance, do we do 6 weeks of math and then 6 weeks of literacy, 6 weeks of math, 6 weeks of literacy? We decided for the first 12 weeks of school, we're gonna focus on math. Just really trying to get every kid what they need for math in the first 12 weeks of school so that they're more able to meet grade level content as we move forward. And then I think after the Thanksgiving break, or before the Thanksgiving break, when we plan our next round of interventions, we'll be maybe switching more to the literacy end of it, so that the interventions are more literacy focused. But overall, we are really, this school year has been, we are in the beginning of this very big transition, I feel, of increasing rigor within the school, developing a school of learners, and kids who are more motivated to persevere and deal with positive stress in a positive way, because we have been noticing a lot of apathy and learned helplessness, which has developed mostly in the middle schoolers. And so we're really trying to talk to kids about positive stress, talk to kids about persevering through challenges, talk to kids about reading the instructions or rereading the instructions for a 10th time, and self-starting and then asking for help.
And we have seen that. We saw, well, you had some 6th graders the other day asking for homework.
Yeah.
Which was fantastic. We had another was a 6th grader that was about missing work?
Yeah.
There was another 6th grader who was like, oh my God, I missed, and now I need to get back, I need to get caught up. And Lorelei was like, that's a positive stress. That's good to have. That's what you want to, that's what we want to instill. So that was nice.
Yeah, so we're really working on Win2 to just analyze the data really closely, create really targeted intervention groups, selecting the appropriate adult to be with those intervention groups with the target in mind, and then continuing to monitor and reflect on that. So.
And I'm excited for March. That's when we come back here, and so I'm excited to showcase where we go. I mean, you guys invest a lot of money into us, and we want to make sure that we can show what we do. And so I'm excited about that. That's our March.
Fantastic.
Okay. Any questions for Lorelei?
Or Kevin.
Any questions for Lorelei?
I mean, I have a question. When we think about the continuum, right, the levels within our MTSS structure, and we think about kids who aren't quite there yet, when we talk about intervention, that's when we get up into like 3 and 4A in those levels. Could you talk a little bit about the role of the classroom teacher? Because when we're talking about, that number of kids that we're trying to get up to grade level, this is more than talking about just intervention. There's a whole lot more behind that. So could one or both of you talk about that piece?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, what I think Lynn's getting at is, I mean, the real work is the tier 1 stuff, right? Is the classroom teacher instruction is huge. I have not heard anybody say that's a tier 2 kid, or that's a level 3 kid, or that's this.
This meeting is being recorded.
What I've heard is these are our kids, and we're going to work together to make sure that all of us, that we get these kids up there. I have not seen a teacher not instruct at the level 3. I don't know if is that what you're asking?
Well, I guess I'm thinking about like the data pieces that you're talking about intervention. That work has to happen in the classroom too, in
Yep.
order to elevate that universal instruction piece. So
So
because you
classroom-
have too many kids that would
Right.
need the intervention to be able to move them over the line.
Yeah, so I think like one thing that's been really tricky is the number of staff and dividing the kids up into manageable groups where engagement is high and it's quality instruction. Luckily for Win2 in middle school, we do have a large number of adults, but for some of the elementary ones, it's like me and the classroom teacher. So, and yeah, sometimes it's not like, oh, here's a group of 6 kids who really need work on repeated addition. Here's a group of, it's not that clean cut. So 2 more interventionists would be great. But it's really like, we're, as Kevin says, all hands on deck. So we're getting the most qualified people to work with the groups that they are qualified to teach.
We're also keeping data around that. And so I think about the form that we looked at in the last week or the week before that Terry Sue shared, and then I shared with the staff. Really identifying what we are doing so that when we get further along, we won't repeat ourselves, or we'll see what's working and we can continue working with that. So, yeah. I don't know, Lynn, if we answered your question or not, but that's
Okay.
okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Anybody else have any questions for?
What?
Listen, I knew what you were trying to go to.
Oh.
Did we not answer it?
You mostly did. It's just your classroom teachers are also upping their instructional rigor that's happening at the universal level, and they're being very data driven at that level too, because they're interventionists as classroom teachers. It isn't all these kids are below and it's you, Lorelai, or the other people who are available during intervention to have that be the place where they catch up.
No, it's not, right, we didn't say it as eloquently as you, but that was surely, there are.
I knew it.
teachers
I knew
are-
it was happening. But
They are working hard. They are working extremely hard to meet the needs of all their kids within their classroom, and to make sure that every single kid receives that education at their level, but yet pushes them and raises the bar up nice and high, so they, because we know that when you raise that bar, kids will reach that. So, thank you for the time.
I have
Yes.
one question.
Yep.
The slide that you showed a few back that had the, not bobcats.
The bobcats.
Okay, bobcats.
Yeah.
The bobcats.
Okay, great. The bobcats, and the literacy and then the math. Do you know, and have you kind of analyzed whether the kids that are, the students that are in the distinguished and meeting categories in literacy, do they also tend to be the same kids that are in the distinguished and meeting in math, and, vice versa?
They are very.
So you have that kind of double that like both struggles,
Both
but
needs.
that they're both, you're trying to bring up the literacy
Yep.
and the
Yeah.
math at the same time, and generally in the same kids. Like, it's less common to have one that's
Yes.
maybe at the distinguished or meeting in literacy, but at the below in
There's a handful of those guys,
Yeah.
which are you're like, yes, we like not that, but like, wait, you can say like, oh, she can go to Reader's Theater with Miss Brown and do something that's enriching and
Right.
still literacy based, but we
Right.
have these really targeted math skills that they need to
Yeah.
work on. But yeah, generally, I mean, if I could have blocked out all the names, I have a spreadsheet that shows math, like their fall data. It's like their math score and their math. Let's call it their color and their literacy color next to each other, so it's the same kid with two blocks.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of red, yellow,
Right.
yellow, green,
Right.
green, blue,
Okay.
So yeah, it's,
That is the trick.
that's the
Right?
trick,
So
yeah.
how do
Right.
you provide that level of supports for both?
Right.
And I think Lorelai was alluding to it earlier, is that when we come into our third block, we'll be looking at maybe switching things up a little bit, but we can't be stopping. So it's really this conundrum of where we're at.
And do you find that in those learners that you have to kind of tend to their kind of their like the emotional and kind of mental piece too, so that they don't end up feeling like in all of these arenas they're not kind of where they need to be, and how do you kind of keep them feeling like that self-esteem and that self-confidence as you try to do all of these targeted interventions? And it seems as though when it starts clicking, because the math and the literacy are really so, very intertwined, that likely then they just start kind of snowballing into greater success with their learning.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I just have a question around the kids who might struggle with their home life. How are you connecting with the families to make sure that you're getting buy-in with kind of this new vibe and new curriculum, and are you getting buy-in from these kids' families, whatever that dynamic might be?
So it's a couple of things that we're planning on doing. We haven't done it yet, but when I did my Title I meeting, and we had a lot of people at the gym, which was fantastic. Zach was there, and I went over a lot of what we heard today. Sorry to Zach, but a lot of what we heard today I went over with them, and it was interesting in that the questions that came up were around priority standards. So I think our families do want to know more. And so what I'm doing later in October is what I call Bobcat breakfasts. So Bobcat breakfast will be for only parents to come in the morning. I'll provide breakfast. It'll be what we're having on that day. So it'll maybe
Parfait.
Parfait and a hard-boiled egg. But it'll be a breakfast and coffee. And the theme of that one, or the idea is going to be to talk about priority standards. Because my wonder is how do we get families involved? I was out last night with my wife, and we were talking about the STAR scores, and I'm talking about this meeting, and she asked me the exact same question. Thanks.
Human service people.
What's that?
I said the human service people.
It must be. And it was, you know, and it dawned on me that we gotta get our parents into this conversation, because, again, I go back to what I said, my second sentence maybe was, nobody wants their child below that line. And so when we've met with parents so far, and I've said to them things like, hey, if I get you flashcards, can you do this at home? Absolutely. Like, that kind of buy-in will only lead to greater results, right? So if parents knew, like our children, knew where they need to go, I believe our parents will support our students to get to where they need to go. And so I was looking up today online, like, flashcards, how do we get those, you know? The sight words that, kindergarten's going from 27 sight words, which was on their list last year, to 100 this year. It's, like we talked about, the rise up, 27 to 100 is a pretty good sized jump. How do we get those cards into parents' hands? And so I actually was meeting with a mom earlier this afternoon, and it was a second grader, and we were having this child's IEP meeting, and we were talking about the flashcards, and I just happened to mention, she's like, oh yeah, get those to me so I can work on those. Like, I really think our parents want it. It's just, how do we get it in their hands? So,
You do have access to family engagement money through Title I, so you could think about literacy nights, math nights, things like that to get people engaged.
You know, the math nights, I don't know if it's gonna draw the people I want. I want to invite people here. Like, get in here, man. We gotta do this. We gotta work together. And my theme throughout this whole year has been, it takes a village. And there's no better village than Bakersfield to get this done.
That's great.
Yep.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
It's very informative.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Appreciate
Thanks.
it.
Laura, thank you so much.
Is anyone else having trouble with the Wi-Fi?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
It's terrible.
I think it's actually, we struggled the whole day in our office. I was at Enosburg High School. Enosburg struggled.
Oh, I struggled
Sheldon
at, I worked
struggled.
today too.
Yeah, I don't think
actually.
it's just, I think it's
Yeah.
everywhere.
3 times today.
Yeah.
Yeah, same thing.
I'm just trying to, I'm struggling a little with the lack of Wi-Fi, so I'm just trying to get
Do you want a
onto
paper copy?
different,
Paper?
possibly.
You can pass that down to me.
Just in case, Mary.
Well, I've got, we have to do have it loaded, I just can't put it over to. Okay, so,
I am offline. I can't search my email. I'm trying to get,
no problem, thanks for trying.
I don't have it.
Okay, Morgan, that brings us to you.
Okay. One action item, kind of a leftover from last month, is that we do now have the VHI annual meeting proxies. As we expected, there's no action items contemplated at that meeting. That meeting is also held on Friday, October 25th in conjunction with the VSA, VSBA annual meeting. Actually, all three boards have given Mary Niles their proxy to vote at the VSBIT annual meeting, which happens 5 minutes before or 5 minutes after the VHI meeting. I'm not sure the order. And if you were inclined to vote a similar motion for the VHI meeting, it would be a motion to appoint Mary Niles as authorized representative to appear and vote on behalf of the board at any and all meetings of the members of the Vermont Education Health Initiative or any adjournment thereof.
I'll make that motion. Do I have to repeat the whole thing?
Yes.
No. One more consent.
Okay, great, we'll do that by roll. Miranda? Aye. Kat?
Aye.
Zach? Arlene? Aye. John?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
Mary is an aye.
The auditors are in this week. They were here for day 2 today, and they will be here at least again tomorrow. As far as I know, there are no concerns that they've brought up yet. Got a big crew of them this year. There are 4 this year, so they're doing a deep dive on the federal side in Title I and the food service program on top of your regular audit. So I will have an update for you next month on how that went. We'll do a kind of shallow dive, I guess, into the FY26 budget. You will be seeing this slideshow over and over and over again over the next few months. We'll go a little deeper each month. Before we get into it, linked in your packet is, again, a letter from the Superintendent's Association, School Boards Association, and the School Business Officials Association that we sort of put out broadly earlier this fall, sort of trying to get ahead of the narrative around FY26 budgets and some of the areas where we see some rough sledding ahead in terms of those three associations. The governor put out a letter probably about a month later, also pointing towards some of the challenges that we had mentioned in the letter, a little bit of laying down the gauntlet in terms of trying to box boards out in terms of how much budgets increase this year. So when you have a chance, read both of them. I think the first, just for some background for some of the challenges we're going to be talking about this fall, and the second for some of the challenges that are likely to come around messaging the budget in the spring. We'll go into the slideshow now. So budget development schedule is not different from prior years. We will look at deeper and deeper drafts of your budget at your next two meetings. Next meeting will really be around looking at staffing and the other expenses, and then hopefully by your meeting in December, we'll have a little better idea of the revenue picture. We're expecting the yield proposal on December 1st, as always. We will also get some preliminary CLA numbers that day, which is something we've not had in the past. So that will, I think, help alleviate some of the whipsaw that you feel at the end of December when the yield number looks really good and then your CLA numbers look really bad and we're pushed back to the budgeting table. Your long-term ADM is scheduled to come out December 15th. Sometimes we get that a little bit early, although I'd be surprised if we have it for your December meeting. That, again, is the weighted pupil count that we get, and that is one of the major drivers of what the tax rate will be eventually. And then if all goes well, we will finalize your budget on January 8th. We can push that off a few weeks into January if we need to. We've done that in the past if we think there's going to be some early legislative action that may kind of change the landscape, or if there's uncertainty on the Enosburg-Richford side in terms of where their high school tuition is likely to end up. But hopefully we'll be solid by January 8th. At your 2025 annual meeting, we'll now be conducting everything by Australian ballot. That was a change that the voters approved last year. So we will still elect a moderator and still elect a clerk, but that will be by ballot on town meeting day. We do need an informational meeting. The statutory requirements this year would be between February 2nd and March 3rd.
February 22nd.
February 22nd, March 3rd. We don't need a quorum. The clerk, the moderator don't need to be there. The board can run that informational meeting, and we're not asking you to set that tonight. We kind of need to look at calendars and make sure that NMV and ER have them on different nights, and we'll get to that probably in December or January. You are allowed, of course, to have more informational meetings, and traditionally we've tried to have a presence in each of the 4 towns, but we will need to name one as the official meeting within that time period. 2 school director seats are up this year. Zach and Mary are the two seats, so I'll get you information on filling out the consent form and the petitions, assuming you're both interested in running again. And then if anyone out there in public access TV land is interested in running, or folks who are looking at the minutes of the meeting, you can contact your town clerk, or you can contact somebody at central office if you're interested in running for one of those positions. As we get into the budget development, we like to tie it to the board goals, so I won't read these, but these are the 3 board goals set by the supervisory union board. Very similar to years prior, there's been some language changes, and we can share this with you if you don't have copies of it already, but I'm guessing that it's gone out. We also like to kind of ground these conversations in enrollment. We've got initial October 1 figures today, which are the enrollment numbers we tend to use for these projections. What we're looking at right now is sort of similar to what you've seen in the past. 2024 is the year that we're in right now. Still projecting growth in all 4 of the towns in terms of their school populations. Right now it's looking like Montgomery and Bakersfields are a little steeper than projected in the past, and Berkshire's and Sheldon's leveling out a little bit more. Sheldon, of course, is the biggest school. Even a small increase tends to be a lot of kids. A small percent increase tends to be a lot of kids. Then on the next slide, and we'll share this, you can kind of see the grade by grade numbers. So this year in the K-8 schools, we are at 828 kids, projecting that to break the 900 mark 3 years from now. So kind of feels right with the growth that we're seeing in the towns. Obviously, things like a pandemic can throw a wrench in those, but this is what we're working with now, and what we're considering as we consider budget changes. This is a list that will flesh out as we move along. The things that I'm seeing on the horizon, PCB remediation is still floating out there. You've got 2 schools that are identified. Nobody thinks that health insurance increases are going to be anything other than double digits again. We just don't know where in the double digits they're going to end up. Probably won't have a solid number until December there, and so at some point we'll have to make a guess for the budget that we feel comfortable with. For FY26, we do not have a settled contract for either the support staff union or the teachers union. We are going to start negotiating with the teachers shortly, we hope, and then with the support staff union, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later. Hopefully in the next few weeks we'll be able to settle a contract for this year, and if that's a 1-year agreement, we'll need to go right into negotiations for FY26. We are also seeing an increase in terms of high school students. We've got a big 8th grade class that will be moving up, a relatively small senior class graduating. It's not going to be as big a swing as we felt last year, and even this difference of 17 kids, what that doesn't take into account is we know that there's a certain number of 10th graders who will be attending Cold Hollow, and so they sort of go into a different tuition calculation. So we may end up close to a wash once we know what those numbers are. We won't really have that until high schools start billing us. We've gotten 1 high school bill to date, and so we've got some big schools out there, and need to wait and see where our kids are ending up. I've had some initial conversations with all the principals around what they see as potential staffing changes. None of this is set in stone yet, and I have not sat down with Michelle Taberge to sort of look at the SU-funded special ed staff, so there may be some further swings as we go on, but I want to put this up there, let you know what the initial thoughts are, because this is the meeting really where the board gets to weigh in on any sort of course changes that you want us to contemplate and start bringing back in November. So in Bakersfield, we're looking at a drop of 2 paraeducators At least one of them is actually going to be moving to the special ed budget at the SU, someone getting that micro-credential to be a behavior technician. And when the SU board is looking at these numbers, they will be able to see everything as a group. In Berkshire, the dropping of a paraeducator and increasing teaching position by 0.6. We have a current staff member who's 2 days a week a teacher and 3 days a week a paraeducator, and that's not ideal for a number of reasons, and they're a fully licensed teacher, so it'll be a small FTE drop, but basically a wash in terms of that position. In Montgomery, dropping the 1 day a week of family engagement coordinator, currently shared with Sheldon, and then at the moment down one paraeducator in the local budget.
And the plan there would be, because they have a full-time school counselor, is that the school counselor would likely be the one that takes on the family engagement work, because if you remember, that's a position that you doubled in the last few years.
And then Sheldon picking up that 1 day a week of that family engagement coordinator, a decline of a paraeducator, and then a net wash in terms of teaching positions, just redefining where that need is. Well, I'll go through it and then we can talk. There's no new data here. This is the equalized tax rate chart that we use in all the presentations. Putting it up here now, I'll just remind you the black line with the round dots is the district-wide tax rate, and then the 4 colored lines are the tax rates for each of the towns after the CLA. The change in how the CLA is calculated and applied this year would mean that that black line is going to drop down, so go up. The district rate is going to look like it's more expensive, but those ending dots would be the same because the impact of the CLA is the same. So if that change had taken place last year, the tax bills for your voters all would have been the same. It just would look like more of the increase was due to the district-wide tax rate rather than the CLA.
Sorry. Morgan.
Yes.
So I know we had a ton of discussion last year about music teachers and specials teachers, and I think that an audit was done on all 4 schools. And I just wondered if that had been revisited by the principals, and if there were, I see that Sheldon is adding some music, but I didn't see anything for Montgomery or Berkshire, and I just wondered, if that has been discussed in the mix.
So we have been holding a lot of discussions generally around ratios in terms of how that is going to inform the budget. We've not done an update of that part of the audit, which is really looking at minutes per kid. That was a pretty deep dive that we did last year. Really more focusing on positions per kid, especially as we see the agency of ed tipping that they're moving towards gathering that data and presenting that data so that you can see comparisons from district to district. I think it's something for the minutes that we could revise and revive if we needed to. I have not looked at it in a year, so I honestly don't remember how much of a lift we made Courtney do to get that data. But we could certainly look at it. And I do think, I think we are leaning into that and are going to get there, and it'll form FY26 conversations in the background, and it'll probably be more front and center for FY27. And I do think the state will be out there probably only a year behind us, is my guess. This chart should be familiar to everyone. I can certainly share it offline so you can read the numbers there. It is now with FY25 data, and I'm using this year instead of the spending per pupil, I'm using homestead tax rates, primarily because that's a number that people understand more than the equalized spending per pupil. For the most part, everyone's position is in the same spot. It's just a different number. And so, again, this shows from the bottom the 4 lowest towns with a tax rate of $1 up to the top, the highest district tax rate of about $1.72. The black line in the middle is the statewide average. The black line halfway down from there is the Franklin County average. The red lines are our colleagues in Franklin County. And then the blue lines are the 2 districts, are our 2 districts. And so you'll see the one closest to the bottom is the Enosburg-Richford side at $1.364, and then a few ticks above that is the NMV rate at $1.706. We discussed last year about putting some of the surplus into a capital reserve fund. We opted not to do that because of the tough budget year. We will have a surplus this year. The auditors are hoping to have that to me by the end of the week. So we'll be discussing that again and whether we can tuck some of that money away into your capital reserve fund, or at least ask the voters for that permission. And that's all I've got for tonight, subject to any questions or thoughts about any changes in the budget that you want us to look at for the next month's meeting.
Maureen, can I just add something about the Bakersfield Para one?
Mm-hmm.
Just so this school year we were budgeted for 3 additional. Before I walked in, there were 3 paraprofessionals that were unfilled. When we did an audit of our special ed services, it was determined that we just needed 1 of those, and that's why there's 2 that aren't. So it's not that we are cutting or reducing 2 existing. It's actually 2 that we recognize we're not in need of services.
Yeah, and the changes that I put up there are really our budget to budget changes. They're not necessarily reflective of who's in the building now.
Thanks.
Do you anticipate any major change with the ADM component of it?
I don't think there's going to be any change to the formula unless the legislature gets involved in early January. There are some timelines set out where they would go in and look at the weights for each of those categories. What I think we may notice over the next couple of years is that there's some categories, ELL students especially, where there's a really big value tied to individual kids, and so if your numbers swing from year to year, that number will swing from year to year. But other than that, I think the other factors that are going into it are relatively stable.
Great, thanks Morgan. You're all set there?
I am, unless there are any other questions.
Okay. Lynn, that brings us to your report.
Okay, just need to paste one thing in here. You just need to refresh, Courtney, because I just added something to that slideshow that was missing.
I think it's okay because I didn't put it in presentation mode until you did it.
Okay, perfect.
I think just let me know.
Okay. So I'll start with personnel, and we do have some hires to approve. So in Bakersfield, Clarice Talley, PE and Health, and Sheldon Stephen Grant, middle school math interventionist. The others are support staff and are informational. So if the board can make a motion for the 2 professional staff, that would be great.
I'll make that motion We'll do that by
Am I on the
roll.
wrong? Hold on, I'm on the wrong. Sorry, I'm reading from the wrong month.
Oh, okay.
And I just
I thought maybe
pasted
mine
that
was
into the
wrong.
wrong month. Give me 1 second. If I could reset
Okay.
myself just for a second, I'm in the wrong month.
No problem.
It's hard to believe it's October already, right? Just trying to read Courtney's very confused look. Okay. Sorry about that. All right, back to personnel. Let me try that again. You already approved all those things last month. So we have one, Bakersfield, Sean McLaughlin Dubois. He is the middle school social studies teacher now at Bakersfield. So I'd ask the board to make a motion to approve.
Great, I'll make that motion for hiring by roll. Kat,
Aye.
Miranda,
Aye.
Zach,
Aye.
Arlene.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Emily. Aye. And Mary is an aye.
So this, although is bolded, is not going to be action for you, it's just informational. Andrew Hathaway, who was the middle school social studies here at Bakersfield, left. He's no longer teaching. So because he's leaving mid-year, it is considered breach of contract. So the board does not need to take action on that. It's informational. We still have some openings that I will just say out loud. Bakersfield is still looking for a preschool paraeducator. I thought we were getting closer, but we're a little bit closer. Still looking for one. Berkshire, we are looking for a paraeducator and a half-time health teacher, and we still are advertising for a school nurse. We have someone in the role right now, but we're going to keep that position open.
She did share that also she's willing to stay until the end of the year
Yes.
as well, as long as needed.
Okay, perfect. In Sheldon, a paraeducator, a half-time health teacher. She and Gavin and Terry Sue are working to fill one between the two of them. So maybe we'll have a December grad that will appear. I'm just notifying the board that you have some administrators who are up for negotiations this year. So that would be Sandy, Kevin, Terry Sue, and Aaron Paquette. So at the end of the meeting, I would like to go into executive with the board and get direction from you about the negotiation process and the approach that you would like me to take for that. Okay? So under students, Courtney always pulls some great student pictures. I know Bakersfield on the left just had their Harvest Day. What was it called? Their Harvest Festival, Kevin?
Yeah.
They looked like they had a lot of fun. At the bottom, I think Montgomery was sharing their partner reading time. In Berkshire, I always love to see the pictures of the students that go to the library to do the Pledge of Allegiance with Mrs. Larrabee, and we're celebrating some Sheldon Bears at the bottom. Was that for the first quarter? Or
It was
for,
our first letter, or Bears Assembly, our first one for the B.
For the B?
Belonging.
Great.
Belonging.
All right. So Morgan and I, we doubled up on some numbers this time. You saw some of these numbers in his. I've given you a few additional number sets to take a look at. So you've seen this, like the historical number. You could see how each school has either grown or reduced the number of students. I mean, we're definitely not a system that is pretty stable. We're down 11 from last year, but our projections shoot us back up into the 850 range for next year. So I think that had to do, as Morgan said, with some larger classes. On the next slide, this just gives you a look at the numbers over time in each grade level. So you'll have access to all of this, so you could take a look and you could see where there are some grade levels where we have larger sizes, larger groups of students, and some where you have small groups. So for example, if you're looking at this year, for some reason our number of fourth graders across the supervisory union is low, and we have a lot of seventh graders across the supervisory union. So it's just interesting to look at the data through that lens. This was data that Morgan pulled together, again, historical, and it's looking at what does our pre-K population look like, and this is across the whole supervisory union, not just NMV. So you can see where we were in 2020 and what our projection would be if we go to the end of this decade out to 2029. It almost doubles the number of students that we have in pre-K. You can see that the growth projections for pre-K or for grades kindergarten through 5th grade across the supervisory union. And you can see what those numbers look like with all those 6th through 8th grade students together in the SU. We have about 422 there. We have 851 kindergarten through 5th graders. And for 9 through 12, we have collectively 488 students. So we're 1,931 students overall. These are our, I should have started with this, our October 1st enrollment numbers, and the state uses that in some of their calculations for different things. So what we know last year when we were at 1939, we were the 13th largest system in the state. And when we just did the listen and learn session with Interim Secretary of Education Zoe Saunders, they were sharing information around sizes of districts, and we were right on the cusp of being placed with the larger districts in the state. So I think 2,000 was right around the cutoff. If you were below 2,000 students, you were in the mid-range. So we were the largest of the mid-range, and we missed being in that larger range by not many students.
Lynn, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
At the high school level, does that number only include high schoolers that are attending either Enosburg or Richford and not our tuition kids?
Correct.
That go out of district or out of the SU?
Correct. That's
Okay.
enrollment in our schools.
So really, if you factored in our tuition kids that we're still paying for, then we
That's
are
true.
over the 2,000 student mark.
Do you know what that
Judging
number
from
is?
the tuition bills, I see, the number roughly.
That's a really good point, Mary. Do you know approximately how many total tuition students we have?
I can't. I can pull last year.
Because you said 19, what?
31.
Okay, so it might, we probably don't have 70 some odd that we're tuitioning out. I think that, but we must have about, what do you think, Morgan, 15 to 20, eh?
Well, at least, yeah, we have
Sheldon Science at 30.
Sheldon sends a lot
Oh,
of
right,
kids
of
to-
course, and a lot of Bakersfield kids go down to Maple Run,
Yeah,
correct,
that's
or in BFA?
Sheldon kids too.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess it's maybe touching 70.
Oh, okay,
So we would be over.
yeah.
If all of those students attended our schools, we would be over.
But from a tax perspective, that's still, that tax burden is on our communities, so we are at, just as far as how we think about those students, like
Right.
they're not attending
We're
with the
paying for
ESU,
more.
but they're still part of our collective kind of tax burden.
It would be an interesting data point that we don't usually share when we talk about budgets. We talk about this number. I think it's interesting that you bring up that point, because it would be interesting to look at that and also call out that there are these other 70 students that we're educating outside.
Right,
Whether it's outside in another public school or somewhere else in a private
right.
school, so that it could be a data point that we share.
And oftentimes, some of those schools are higher per pupil spending.
Correct.
Granted, the private school kids, the threshold is the Vermont state average tuition, but we know, that our kids that go to the academies, for instance, those are getting up toward $20,000 a year, and we're obligated to pay that full freight of the academies. And even the other public schools outside of the SU, oftentimes those have higher per pupil spending.
Correct. So every October, I need to bring you reports on class sizes. So you had links in all of your principals' board notes this month that shared their individual class sizes. Is there a way to make that bigger, Courtney?
No,
There's not.
not in slideshow.
So if you don't have this, you will have it. What this is really showing is we have a class size policy that we really haven't looked at for a while, and we probably should bring back around. I think that we should take a look at it through the lens of not only what has our policy been, but also what do the ed quality standards say about class sizes? Because this is something that, you know, as we dig further into budget, we're going to need to talk more about in terms of the number of students in each of our classes. And you set me up perfectly for this in the beginning when you talked about effect size, and you talked about there isn't the same evidence for the effect size of small classes on student outcomes. So we're having to take a hard look at all of our decisions that we're making, and I encourage us to take a look at that class size. The way ours is written is that in that K through 2 range, you have a minimum of average for math and reading is 10. So our expectation would be that there would be a minimum of 10 students in those classes, and all others would be 12. In grades 3 through 6, math and reading would be 12, and all others would be 14. And in 7 and 8, the minimum would be 14 with the exception of PE. So you have the data there for each of your schools. I know that there's Kevin and Gavin. Maybe could you talk a little bit about the distinction? You've got a couple grade levels where you share 2 different numbers. So Gavin, you have K2 reading and 3-6 reading. And Kevin, you have 2 different numbers for
Mine's, it's just what we talked about earlier. It's our win block tool. So we have multiple people that are working with, is that what you're talking about? I can't see the numbers, but.
Yeah, you have 6.7 and 13.5.
Right, so there's 12 teachers taking on 5, 6, 7, 8, or I don't know, is it 6, 7, 8 up here? So if we look at those.
3-6, that was the before.
It's that it comes out so that with so many teachers, you can really split the numbers down. So there might be a group that has 8, there might be a group that has 3, but it's really dependent on the need. Same with the lower grade.
So your 13.5 reflects universally. That's the average of the number of students in grade 2.
Correct.
With a grade 2 teacher.
Correct.
By way of example.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Is that the same for you as well?
Yeah,
Gavin?
so I included interventionists and win block groupings because we do typically during those blocks have a larger number of instructors in the room.
Okay.
And you'll see for 3-6 particularly that's a pretty significant drop. Although granted, it's also significant for K2 as well.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that is also because we have a multi-age grouping as well, and so for that, it was actually required to bring in additional interventionists as well to help support some of that differentiation.
Okay. Perfect. So the board has all of this data, and you can take a look at it, and I'm sorry that you can't see it all there. There are some similarities across the district. There are some areas where the numbers are not as close. You have one of your 4 schools that has 2 classrooms per grade level, and that's Shelton, our largest school, and the other 3 schools all have 1 of each grade level. So you can take a look and see, you know, what's the range, what's the difference between those, and we could bring this back to, certainly can bring it back to policy and take a look at, like I said, our existing class size policy and also what the ed quality standards recommendations will be effective July 1, 2025. The class size policy was linked in your board notes as well, so if you wanted to peek at that, you could. So for this month, I wanted to bring you some attendance data to take a look at, and I will tune into what this looks like when it's projected this far away for our next meeting, so I'll make sure you have it in advance. So what this is showing you is from left to right, Montgomery, Bakersfield, Berkshire, Sheldon. So it is looking at your daily attendance rate for each of those schools. So Sheldon has pretty solid high attendance rate, and you're pretty consistent, pretty close between Montgomery and Berkshire, all above the 95%, which is great, and you've got Sheldon that is pushing 97%, which is fantastic. So that's by school. The next slide is by grade level, which is interesting when you look at that. Those are our little eager pre-K students on the left, and then these are our 8th graders out on the right. So you could see that even though it looks like a really big drop, the spread is a percentage point per line. So our lowest is like 94.7, and the highest pre-K is up around just above 99. So you can see that, that's something for us to just be mindful of as we're pushing our educators or our middle schoolers, as you were talking about earlier, Kevin, to try to like persevere through and work hard, and let's keep our eye on what that attendance rate is. We also look at the rate by weekday, which is interesting, and I've been able to do this across the supervisory union, and when I break it out by district, it's not all the same. So there is a distinction that's glowingly obvious to me, that Fridays you have fewer students that attend school, slightly fewer on Monday, pretty solid on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, but again, we're only talking a couple of percentage points, so we're going to maintain our efforts around student attendance with our students. This next breakdown is by ethnicity, so you can see across the bottom, African American, Caucasian, not specified, American Indian, multiracial, Hispanic, Asian, and declined to specify. So this is another data point that we look at. And the boys are coming to school more in NMV than the girls, which is a different trend. When you look at the whole supervisory union, the girls slightly are a little bit higher than the boys, so they're almost they're a little more than a percentage point higher for the boys over the girls. Any questions on any of the, or comments on any of the attendance data? Okay. So teachers negotiation, Morgan talked about that a little bit. Our agreement with the teachers union expires on June 30th. So we have notified the teachers union that we have an intention to bargain with them. So we'll be working with the board this fall to establish dates to begin. So we'll give you information once that's been set. So can you remind me who is on the teacher negotiation committee for this? So it's Mary and John, right? And then we have two others on the other side. Okay, perfect. So in terms of support staff negotiations, that's a little more complicated. So their support staff agreement expired June 30th of 2024. We were in negotiations with the support staff. I'm actually going to read. I have something prepared. I'm just going to read from it. So the board negotiating team and the Cold Hollow Education Association Union met 4 times from January through March this past year. On March 25th, the board and the union declared that they were at impasse and they agreed to mediation. The board and the administration has been eager to come to a resolution on this matter. It's been taking longer than expected to get a date planned for the mediation. Our lawyer that represents the supervisory union has been working closely with the NEA UNISERV director to schedule this mediation. Over the course of the last 5 weeks, we've offered up about a half a dozen dates, and none were working. So thankfully today, this is the update, we received word that October 21st has been selected, that it's mutually agreed upon between the two sides, so we're excited to be able to move forward with this process. As we agreed upon in our ground rules, negotiations are done in open session, and so either side can share the details of formal proposals. Additional conversations outside of formal proposals cannot be shared. The last formal proposal offered by the union was on January 22nd. The major changes it contained included the addition of a 30-minute paid lunch, 4 paid days in case of snow days, 2 new and 2 existing using CTO time, 3 additional contracted days for in-service training for support staff who work directly with students, 3 additional paid combined time off CTO days, 3 additional paid holidays for school year staff and 1 additional paid holiday for year-round staff, a 403B plan with an employer match of up to 5% of salary, a $2.75 wage increase in the 24-25 school year, and a $2.25 wage increase in the 2025-2026 school year. An additional 50-cent wage increase for a lead behavior technician, and an additional $2 wage increase for a lead cook. The last formal proposal offered by the board was on March 25th. It contained the following: 3 additional contracted days for in-service training for support staff who work directly with students. 3 additional paid personal days if the current CTO time is converted back to a sick day model. Increasing annual buyback of CTO time to the employee's daily rate. It's currently at the high school step 1 rate. 2 additional paid holidays for school year staff. A $1.25 wage increase for the 2024-25 school year. An addition of 50-cent wage increase for a lead behavior technician. There were additional language changes that both sides contemplated during the process. Mediation is one step in the process. If mediation is not successful, the process moves to fact-finding. In fact-finding, a neutral fact-finder will hear presentations from both the union and the board and issue a written report of their findings. This report will become public if the agreement is not settled within 10 days of publication. The board can impose a contract 30 days after the fact-finder's report if there is still no agreement. To give some historical context, the board last negotiated with the support staff union in the spring of 2023. During that negotiation and the one prior, the board used data to determine that the compensation for our support staff was not competitive with either the local job market or the support staff compensation in other districts in surrounding counties, including Lamoille, Franklin, Orleans, and Caledonia. As such, the board's efforts resulted in our support staff agreement outpacing many of the schools in our neighboring counties. Raises received by support staff over the past 10 years. On July 1, 2024, there was no salary increase because the negotiations are not settled. When the contract is settled, support staff will receive a retroactive raise a retroactive salary increase. On July 1, 2023, our support staff received $2.75. On July 1 of 2022, the agreement was that they would receive 75 cents, but we entered into a side letter with the union and instead gave them $2 in order to keep pace with the job market. On July 1, 21, they received 75 cents. I'm just going to tell you the year now. It's all July 1. 2020, 50 cents. 2019, 75 cents. 2018, it's really 2016, 17, and 18. Those were the years where all the single districts merged into one supervisory union collective bargaining agreement with one salary schedule, so all support staff received between 25 cents and $1. In 2015, they received 50 cents. In 2014, they received 50 cents. And in 2013, they received 50 cents. So we're relieved to have a date today. Receiving that date was a huge relief, and we look forward to moving forward on this and getting this settled for our support staff. Any questions or anything that either of you want to add? Or Morgan or Mary? Okay. So in terms of facilities, I'm going to just ask Morgan to help me out with this part a little bit. So we're going to give you just high level. We did do a second round of PCB testing in Berkshire, and
the state has those results. We do not officially have those results yet, but we anticipate that we're going to need to do more sampling in Berkshire to continue to determine the extent of the permeation of the PCBs. Hopefully we will have official word that we can share with the board soon, but I think North Country High School is taking up all the attention of everybody in the state, PCBs right now.
I just want to acknowledge it's frustrating. Like I'm looking at Gavin's face. He's had these 2 classrooms shut down for, this is the second school year, and it's really frustrating, especially when you're tight in there. What this means is if you have to do another round of testing, it is you wait a long time to get the testing, and then you wait an even longer time to get the testing results back. So I just want to acknowledge the frustration and just point out that it's part of the process, and we don't have any control over when they come to test, nor do we have any control over the speed at which they navigate those results and then tell us what to do with them. So it's challenging to remain patient, but that's all we can do in this process. We also want to give you a little update on the Sheldon generator. So was it 2 weeks ago? Week and a half ago?
yeah.
2 Fridays ago?
Yeah.
It was last Friday.
Last Friday. It was, okay, so it's longer than a week.
Yeah. The generator blew. I will say our facilities director
It
was
blew because the whole, like, area lost power, so, yeah. I mean, it wasn't just the generator that day, it was conflicts of,
right.
yeah.
The facilities director was in my office the day before talking about problems with the generator. And the next day I got a call when I was in Burlington for trainings, and I got a call that we have a problem with the generator in Sheldon. So I don't know how much we want to share about where we are with the generator, or do you want to give some history?
FEMA supported the purchase of a lot of generators after the '97 flood, a couple of years after that. I believe this is of that same generation, because schools were designated as emergency shelters. Well, we found out that Sheldon has a different emergency shelter designated, and so with this old generator, we're going to be looking at likely replacing it and trying to work with the town on whether it needs to be a shared investment between the town and the schools as it is with all of our other towns, or if, because the shelter's no longer at the school, if we should just take it on ourselves. So it's something that we'll bring to you at a future meeting, and we'll leave it to Vern and Terry Sue to decide how quickly we need to move on it.
Have we opened that conversation with the select board?
I believe that Vern has talked with them. I don't know if it's select board or with Matt, but I think he's had a conversation with somebody there.
Yep.
We
Is there
were
something you
unaware
wanna
in our
add?
building that we're not the shelter. Like, everyone in my building thinks we're still the shelter, so that's news to me, so that's good news for if an emergency happens.
Were you aware in Sheldon that it had switched, or was Miranda aware?
No, I've had a lot of people come to me expressing concern and what's gonna happen, and they were under the assumption that we are the place to be.
And they confirmed that with Vern.
I believe so, yeah.
Where is it
Did they say
now?
where it was?
Oh, I don't even know of a place that would be big in, yeah, okay.
We'll try to get that information
find
about
out.
where
Okay.
they're saying it is,
It
but
might be the fire department, I could probably find
that
out.
actually sounds right
I
to me.
think it might be, it doesn't have a capacity of that size, so that is worth a conversation in itself. The other thing that has come up, kind of related to this, is without power, and we have 0 cell signal. There was 0, if there was an emergency like this, there's no ability to call out, because there's not one cell provider that has one bar
Well,
there.
if you stand in the parking lot on one foot,
I've done it, like.
you can make a call.
Yeah.
We learned
I
that
made a
that day.
call, I
Yeah.
got in front of it, my AT&T worked.
I've had a lot of parents come to me expressing concern, not so much about the power itself or the generator, but the lack of the ability to communicate should there be an emergency because of a power outage.
And that was brought to our attention that day, and so we have been talking about trying to make a plan to, with the generator working, having the phone lines working, we're looking into that to see if we can
Or
make that work.
another option.
Well,
Yeah.
one of the options was about getting a message to central office, and central office
Yeah.
leaning into communication, sending staff from Sheldon is what we tried that day.
Yeah, it went really smoothly.
You did it in about an hour.
Yeah.
I mean, we had no
Yeah.
child left behind, it was very smooth and fast, and it went
Yeah.
really well. I was very proud of my staff, and the students, so.
And Vern was told it's the fire station.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of that. Let me have some conversations,
Let us know
We'll
if
let
that's gonna
you-
change.
because that makes sense, yeah, okay, yeah, I will.
So our other 3 schools are the shelters?
As far as we
As far as we
know.
know.
I mean, we didn't know that until there was a problem with the generator. And it's, in all of the other agreements, it's the town who maintains. We test it and I think we put gas in it, I'm not even sure, but it's supposed to be the town that maintains. And I think when there was a problem, it went to them and they said, but we have this other thing now. So that's how it came out. We haven't heard anything from Bakersfield, Berkshire, or Montgomery about a change.
What other facility in Sheldon is as well equipped as the school to manage a large group of people in the case of an emergency?
I mean, in my opinion, equipped, none.
Yeah.
Not for the volume of people that are now in
Right.
Sheldon, so I don't know if when
Right.
that
That's
decision
fine.
was made, I'm unclear on that, how long it's been that way. But, I mean, per our attendance and our pupil numbers, like, we're through the roof, so.
Well, I mean, I was teaching in Montgomery in '97 when the flood happened and provided childcare because the community was just devastated.
Right.
And to think back on how many people were in and out of that building for 3 meals a day, for picking up materials and resources for childcare, like there's a lot of space that's needed, showers, water, all of that.
I mean, there are those amenities at the fire department, but you can't fit that many people in the fire department.
And you should know that when the fire department's full and people start showing up at the school, we're not gonna say, sorry, we're not
We don't have a
shelter.
generator. Yeah,
We're
no.
down the road.
But we'll have to
We'll
contend
take
with the generator piece.
It is
Let's
working,
figure that
we
out.
have it working again, but
Yeah, it's worth a
It's
larger
not reliable.
conversation
Yeah.
with the town for sure and get some clarity on that.
Okay. So at our last meeting, we talked about the LEAPS program in Bakersfield, and we talked about the Bakersfield ASP. And we were talking about the distinction between the two and the some of the challenges. Did Heather come to this meeting?
Yeah.
So talked a little bit about one of the pieces that was really challenging is getting students to come to the LEAPS program and helping families. I think you weighed in on this a little bit too at the last meeting, is helping people to see the distinction between childcare and the enrichment program. So that just to remind people where we are with the conversation. We also talked about how in Bakersfield we tried to bring the LEAPS program back to this community for our K-5 students. So we had that short-term 21C grant to be able to do that. It expired at the end of this year. So we're gonna have to navigate conversations about now what, because we don't have that funding for this program. And we wanted to take a look at data related to the LEAPS program and what that was costing you per child to be able to do that. And I'll add a little more. Can you switch to the next slide and then we'll come back? So Heather put together this slide which represents the average daily attendance. So she looked at what's the maximum in each site on the left. I'm looking at the elementary program piece. What was the average daily attendance? And then what did that equate to in terms of cost per student hour? So when we look at the average student attendance, both Bakersfield and Berkshire were smaller than the other schools. Bakersfield was the smallest. The cost per student in both of those communities was higher at $10 per student hour. In the middle high school programs, they're slightly different. In the structure of that Richford High School program, was deliberately, it makes sense to us in terms of how they structured that program, that would have been more expensive to run, and they're run under a different funding source than 21C. I can't remember the name of it.
There was some ARP money, I think, that was covering that.
Okay. So I think there's something else too, because they're in a cycle but not in our same, it's probably 21C, but it's in a different cycle than our main 21C cycle. So these are the numbers that we said we would bring back to you in terms of cost. We're not asking you to make a decision tonight, but it's something that as we get closer to locking in on a budget, we need to figure out what we're going to do about the Bakersfield program. Because that's the cost we had per student hour, and we had grant funding to cover that. We won't this year, and we're gonna have to talk about what does that mean.
So Lynn, I missed the last meeting. This is just the summer
Yes,
leaps? So it doesn't have an impact on the school year leaps or?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's because, Arlene, the summer camp for Bakersfield, when we wrote the grant this last time, they were included in the Enosburg site and kids were bused there. So we got a short-term grant to try to pilot bringing it back. Unfortunately, we did not get the numbers that we had hoped to get. And we had a pretty deep conversation about what are some of the root causes around the numbers, potentially in Bakersfield. Does anybody want to add anything to what I missed from that last conversation?
Lynn, how long had it been since there was a summer leaps in Bakersfield? It's been a while, hasn't it?
6 or 7 years, maybe?
Yeah, so this was the first year back after not having it for.
One of the things that we'll say when Heather was sharing about some of the challenges is it tends to be similar people that work both in the ASP and the LEAPs. So we've really upped our game in terms of enrichment and rigor in our LEAPs program. And she shared a couple of meetings ago about the depth of what was offered in some of those other programs, and we couldn't get there here because it takes a lot of professional learning with the staff to be able to get there, and our staff was trying to work both, so anytime there was professional learning, they didn't come. So we had things that were sent here that didn't get utilized because that staff didn't know how to utilize those things. So there is that question of there is confusion between here in Bakersfield, ASP as childcare and LEAPs as enrichment. And I think often they get thought of as the same thing. And one of the wonderings that we had last time was, do we think that the students in the community understand the distinction, and are they not signing kids up for LEAPs because they don't think they need childcare? I think you had a
Yeah.
good point about that last time.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard from a few parents, and including my wife and I, were confused whether or not that was enrichment or like more for childcare.
Yeah.
So I think it'd be great for, more education to the community on what LEAPS actually is.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have a breakdown of the daily attendance by age or grade?
I don't think I have that. I don't think she shared that last time, did she?
I'd be curious to see.
So that's only K-5, but I don't have it by,
Like how
I could get
many-
that, we could bring that to the
I'm
next
just
meeting.
curious.
Are you thinking about the cutoff for childcare age?
Childcare age, and just curious if there's a trend. I mean, does it correlate to, do people think it's for daycare, or is it more, kindergartners and first graders than it is the older kids? I'm just trying to see if there's any, and who are the people that are consistently going?
Mhm.
Is there any trend there?
We can take a look at that. We'll ask Heather to bring that back for next time. Any other questions or comments on the LEAP piece? Anything you wanna add?
No, I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but it appeared that the same people that were here for after-school program were the same kids that were in the LEAPs. So, I didn't see like a boatload of kids leaving at 3 o'clock.
Okay. So the second piece that you asked us to do was to look at the Bakersfield ASP program and look at the financial stability. We looked at that last fall, and we said we would bring that back this fall. So the financial stability of the school-based childcare program. And just as a reminder to set the stage for that, this is a really unique program that was started at least a couple of decades ago by Sharon, who's over my right shoulder, 20 years ago? 25 years ago, to fill a need in the community. So this is something that's been happening at the school for a long time in terms of access to childcare. So that ASP program serves as a community childcare space. So when we don't have school well, I'm actually going to go to your slide because you've got a lot of that covered, and why don't you go over that piece?
Sure. Yeah, I was asked to get some data, I
You can make that bigger.
But anyway, there's some data up there around the financial part. You can see that the expenses and the revenues that were calculated, Morgan was wonderful at getting that for me. You can see that there is a surplus, if you would, on a couple of the years. And to date, so far, we are also there. When it was originally dreamt up, Sharon, back 25 years ago, it was I think it was Bill Samuelson was the
Business manager,
the CFO, or at that point here in our district, and it was, as long as it's not going under, then we'll continue. And so that's what back then. That's what the thought was. That was again 2.5 decades ago. And then I just asked the people that are coordinating it currently, what does it look like during the off times of the school year? And so you can see that it does not run at all during leaps are in session. So it's not offered at this time. The summer leap session.
Can I just ask if that's a change? Because I think was there early morning and late ASB before?
My understanding, talking to Heather, is that leaps is early morning as well.
Okay.
But yes, we have somebody that covers that from 7 until until the kids go outdoors. When she and I talked the other day, it was when we decide, or if whoever decides not to do it anymore, is that going to be covered by leaps, or is that going to be covered by AS or by the school? And my understanding is they're getting paid by their rate here at the school, correct? So
That's how it is, at least with like my kids' school is.
But you're talking about ASP.
It's
It's
going through the LEAPS program before the school. Sharon might be able to help out with that.
I believe Berkshire does the same thing. There's an early morning leaps.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to tease out, was there a time when ASP kept kids from 5 to 6, or
Yes.
came
in the
earlier,
after.
6 to
Yes.
7?
It was initially.
Or 6
we
to
were
7
open-
before.
Yes, we were
leaps.
open from 5 to
Yes.
6 in the evening, then we moved it to 5:30, and then it was kept at 5:30, and Leaps was running, and they said they would pick up the 5 to 5:30, and then it kind of wasn't really encouraged after 5, and it was amazing how parents could get there for 5,
Yep.
and so we never continued to offer the
Right.
5:30 when Leaps was in session. It is till 5:30 during regular ASP, but that's a different.
Right, so
Yeah.
during the school year, when LEAPS is in session, it is not happening. Summer LEAPS, there's 6 to 15 students first thing in the morning, and then there's those same 6 to 15 are after the session is over. So LEAPS runs from 9 until 3, so pre 9 o'clock, 7 to 9, ASP is in place, 3 to 5, or 5:30 rather, ASP is in place. In between.
I think it was 8 to 3, Kevin.
8 to 3?
Yeah.
8 to 3. In between LEAP sessions during the school year, we have approximately 24 students. Thanksgiving break, we're open for 2 days, again, 16 and 24 students. December break, there's nobody, it's closed, the building is closed up. February break, 16, 24, that's what we're expecting, just through historical data. April, same. It's hard to get an actual number because parents are on vacations for a lot of those breaks, but that's what they're expecting. That so far this year, there's been seemingly an increase of around 8 students that have been starting since the beginning of the school year. And then as of a couple of days ago, yesterday I guess it was, there were 2 registered daycares in Bakersfield, and now we're down to just 1. So this ASP program is a registered daycare through the state.
So is the one that you're talking about this program, or this
No,
program?
there's an
and
additional
another?
one. I'm not gonna mention it out loud, but there's one out there. Yes, Arlene?
Is there a limit to the number of students who can be in the program based on staffing or?
Yes, we have to meet childcare regulations. We are a licensed childcare program, and we have to follow those regulations.
So what is our limitation number-wise?
It also depends on the space.
I had heard rumor that we could only take 10 kids in the ASP, and I was surprised to hear that. And I said I didn't know, but probably to check in at school and they could tell you better.
I think it's more staffing.
It's staffing. So
Staffing.
we have a couple of kids that, my understanding is, seeing it, is that there are some people that work. It's not just one person running it, so. And similar to our preschool, like I just heard today that we have 12 students enrolled in our preschool, and that's the max that we can have at this point, so. Before we have to look at additional staffing.
Similar regs.
Same regs, really, yeah, and they're pretty stringent.
Yeah.
And you have to do the whole STARS, and we're up this year, and it's a whole new process, and, yeah, there's.
So we are limited to like 12.
Depending on personnel. Yep.
So are the staff who work in the ASP program separate and distinct from NMV they are not NMV employees?
I think they all are, right?
They are, for the most part, yes.
Yes.
Which challenges
So-
things, sorry.
So we have either support staff or professional staff that work for NMV that have other roles, or they are exclusively focused on the ASP program? Or they're also teachers or paras here at other,
So there's support
well.
staff. We have a support staff person that is, besides Sharon, professional staff, but the support staff who is one of the facilitators of the ASP program. My understanding is, looking at the summers, that there's also some summer help that come in that are not necessarily employees of during the school year. But I don't know, Morgan would know more. How are they paid through? They're paid through the budget though, because the money that's accumulated here goes into the general fund.
It goes into a separate fund, but it goes through the school board books.
Okay.
NMV's books, and it's paid out of NMV's tax ID number.
and where we landed with the conversation a couple years ago was that if it was self-supporting and was not in the kind of negative impact from a budget perspective, that was part of kind of this last couple years of continuing it, correct?
That was one of the factors that you talked about.
Yeah.
I think what came up at this last meeting is there's some other factors that are also contributing to this. Like, you're going to have to make a decision about whether or not LEAP's summer remains at Bakersfield. And I think there's a connection between it. I know it's not the intention, but there is some competition between ASP and LEAP's in terms of staffing and offerings. And like I said, it does get confusing because these are the same people trying to work for two separate programs under the one umbrella. So, I mean, if I could wrap this all up, I would say we're in the education business everywhere else, and we are also in the childcare business in this one school. And I understand that where this came from was from a really good place to try to fill the hole around childcare. If this were to come up today somewhere else, I would say don't do that. Like, we've got to focus on being really good about education. And so now you're in a place where you still have this program that's running out of here, and I know that there's this like conversation about, is this a school program or is this not a school program? But all the work is happening by, I mean, your business manager is doing a chunk of this work, and other people who work here are getting funded out of this model, but they're still school employees as well. So it's getting really complicated. And I think that it's having an impact on LEAPs. And I know we had this worry in Bakersfield and Richford because we had a program, Berkshire and Richford. We had that partnership with Notch, where in years past we were able to offer programming from 8 until 5 for students because they went from 8 until noon to the Notch, and then they went from noon until 5 in Berkshire and in Richford. And so there was a real worry, like, what's this going to do for families? And when we looked at the students between those two communities, we did not see that was much of an impact from their enrollment from last year to this year in terms of families that couldn't access it. They figured it out. And I do think I heard you say that, Sharon, about the 5:30 time. Like, there are some ways that some families access it because it's there and it's convenient. But I think what I'm struggling with internally is how much of this is by necessity that these families need it, and I'm struggling with the distinction between the needs in this community and the needs in your other 3 communities.
Can I speak for a second?
That's up to Mary.
Briefly.
Yeah. I think if you choose to let it go, before I put in about 60 hours, because I don't get paid, the work I do is all volunteer. This STARS, I'll probably put in 60 hours. Where it is would make a huge difference. If we need to take that money and reopen elsewhere, because I can tell you there are families in town who need care beyond the 7 hours of LEAPs, and in August as well as July. I'm gonna do as a community member what I feel is the right thing. I would just want the heads up because it's a lot of legwork. I love the fact it's in the school, but if that's what needs to happen, I can approach the town and.
It's a gut-wrenching conversation, to be completely honest with you, but these are the conversations, this is where we're at with education in Vermont, is we're having to examine every single decision we're making. So even though this looks like it isn't that we're running into a deficit, it is having an impact on the LEAPS program and access for those students. And so we might lose that opportunity because we don't have funding for that piece. And you're gonna have to contend with, are the numbers big enough in Bakersfield to fund that? So it's all connected, and this is one example of the really difficult decisions that you have ahead of you.
So just a question about if I'm a community member in Bakersfield and I want to work at the after-school program, who is employing me?
NMV.
So I get a check from NMV. NMV is a registered daycare provider on the website that I can find. Okay, interesting.
No, the Bakersfield after-school program is the licensed program. If you look on the state website, it's the Bakersfield after-school program.
Okay.
Which falls under the NMV umbrella.
Right, but that's on childcare licensing, that's what we're called.
Okay.
I have a concern too, Sharon, that with the change in the program used to be open Christmas, used to be open Thanksgiving break, used to be open.
We've never been open Christmas. February break, April break.
Seriously? I stand corrected. I thought it was open for both.
So we need direction.
So just so I can try to understand this kind of the intersection between the ASP and the LEAPS. What you're kind of trying to drill into is, does the presence of the ASP program here pull away families and kids that would otherwise be more engaged with the LEAPS, and that is the reason that we're having the lower enrollment numbers, the higher cost for the summer LEAPS, and possibly not going to be able to continue the LEAPS program in the summer here.
So you have to find funding for the LEAPS program for the summer.
Right.
Is the biggest
Because the grant was a
piece.
one-time
The second
thing.
piece is, I think part of the low attendance is the rigor and quality of the enrichment that is being offered, because this is the one group of staff members that Heather is not able to access and pull in to the professional learning because they have to work at ASP. Whenever we're not offering LEAPs, those same people are working at ASP, so they can't come out and get that same thing. So
Right.
what ends up happening is LEAPs here in the summer looks a lot like what ASP looks like in those hours that it's offered outside of LEAPs.
Yeah.
So I think that's where we got into that, like, does the community even know that this piece of it is supposed to be enrichment, but we haven't been successful in making it look much different
Right.
here,
Okay.
which is unfortunate, I think, for our
Well,
students.
I think that's a huge point, that I think one thing hasn't been LEAPs here in the summer for a long time. And I think, like Zach said, I think most of our community does not understand the difference at all in the summertime. And that, you know, maybe there needs to be a separation of the two, to say that, you know, if you're gonna be LEAP staff, you need to be LEAP staff, and you need to do these trainings. This has to happen. And the rigor has to be there, if we're going to do LEAPs in this community. It's not daycare, you know, to really push that home. I think the fact that we haven't had LEAPs for so many years, parents, don't, you know, for a lot of them, they weren't here before. You know, those kids are kindergarten or 5th grade, so they have never known LEAPs to be here in the summer. You know, I'd love to see us do at least another year and say, we're really gonna make a difference and really show this as an enrichment program. And this is what you're doing, and you are doing it from 8 to 3. You're not doing it and then going out and playing because kids don't feel the difference either. I mean, I came in and did a session this year and was kind of surprised. Yeah.
How many of the ASP kids or their families are eligible and are receiving subsidy for the program?
Probably half. We also, through our STARS accreditation, so we have to have extra stars to take that money.
Yep.
We also have to acquire extra stars. We're currently 4 stars accredited to do protective services.
Do we have to feed kids? Are we feeding kids?
Feeding, you say feeding?
Feeding as part of,
No,
part
they're
of the
bringing
STARS?
their own
They bring their own
Okay.
lunch, yeah.
And the ASP program serves kids of what age, from what age to what age?
So they can actually serve incoming kindergarten students. But what we found is families chose not to do it this summer because they couldn't do LEAPs. You have to be 5. So if you turn 5 in June, you can do LEAPs. Excuse me, you can do ASP, but you can't do LEAPs.
So the ASP isn't for newborn, infants
No.
and toddlers?
No, it's for 5 and up. That's the other piece. Our one childcare program in town is basically for preschoolers. Where does a child in kindergarten go when parents are working and there's no LEAPs for a month?
I think the hard part is that, and I think we should table this soon and come back to it in the next month, but I think the hard part that I'm having with this is that we have a daycare problem, a childcare problem as a state, and we're trying to solve for that within the education system. I think if we were to examine the childcare issues in Montgomery, in Berkshire, in Sheldon, in Enosburg and Richford, we would see that we don't have enough spaces for families in any of those towns. I'm not saying that's good news, it's not. It's terrible news, but I don't think that is one more thing that we can hold on our backs in the education system.
I do have one more question,
Sure.
and then I agree, we should probably table it. So, and all the costs of this kind of what runs through the central office, the budgeting, the money, those costs is that just something that NMV absorbs? Or that comes out of, those are considered expenses and,
Yeah, we don't.
I mean, it's probably hard to kind of
My time or
amortize
Franny's
it
time,
down
it's
to
just
the
part of
dollar.
the SU budget.
Yeah, okay.
And I think the other piece is, right now you're financially in a place where you're not running into a deficit, but you also heard Sharon, like Sharon has single-handedly kept this afloat for all of these years. So she's not billing for her time, and you know, at some point, if Sharon's not doing this, we're gonna have another problem to contend with if it remains here.
And Sharon, may I ask you a question? If the board were to decide that it's time to decouple the ASP from NMV and from it being based out of the Bakersfield School, what do you feel like you would be able to find a spot to maintain your program?
So my husband is on the select board. He feels very committed to this town fulfilling this need. I know of one possible option. I think, you know, the accessibility of a space, you know, playground, et cetera. I mean, it's different than 3 to 5 year olds, I have to say. It's a lot easier, you know. But it's like starting over 1998, you know, when I had no idea what I was doing, but my children lost their childcare. I had to figure out something. I'll do it again, if that's what I need to do. I'm gonna start by talking to parents, because they are the reason why I'm doing it. I'm not doing it for me. I'm not even really doing it for my grandkids, because I'm kind of around working part-time. I'm doing it for the community. And what I know is if you're taken care of when parents are working, then the educational piece flows a lot better. I know it was for me, and I want to make sure for children that they have that, because it is awful to go to work and not know where your kids are. And when I lost my childcare that fall, I was piecing things together. So that will be my piece, right? Whatever.
Well, it clearly has tremendous value, and I applaud all the work that you've done.
Yeah, I think that we have similar goals, right? Like we didn't have any of these when you did this 25 years ago. Kids went home on the bus at 3 o'clock, and there wasn't anything in the summer. So I think that, you know, we also as a system have been looking at what are the ways in which that we can provide opportunities for our students beyond the normal hours of the day through that educational enrichment lens. So that I think that we're on the same page of that piece. It's just a matter of what should continue to be in the education component.
And Lynn, I think very much so, LEAPS covers that, but the big hardship that I know for my son especially, is that week between, or that 2 weeks between, whatever that, you know, it's suddenly, okay, well, no daycare is gonna take you for 4 weeks out of the year, one here, one there, one there. And, you know, I don't know if we expand LEAPS to cover those, or what we could do.
We can't actually expand LEAPS, because those are requirements within our grant for the number of weeks that we can operate.
Is Bakersfield still a part of is that the?
No. So we have to wait until we go through another cycle, because they didn't have a site. You can look for other grant money potentially, but they didn't have a site in our first.
For the summer?
Right.
Okay.
I mean, this is a chronic question. How much can the school, the district, and the schools hold? And we simply don't have the capacity or the resources, both in our human capital and our capital, to shoulder all of the disparate and needs in all the communities. I mean, do we want to? Of course, would we, in an ideal world, would we love to shoulder it all? Absolutely. But increasingly that is hard, and it's tough when schools are asked to hold so many of these really disparate needs from students' needs, family, community needs. So these are not easy conversations.
One last question I just have before we table it.
Yeah.
Just wondering if LEAPS were to absorb the ASP kids, where would the gaps be? I've heard school vacations, obviously, when LEAPS is not open. So I heard the talk about we're open at 7 a.m. like a, you know, traditional daycare. How many kids are actually here at 7 a.m.? So where would those gaps be throughout the week? I'm just curious to see if you were to somewhat say, okay, we're making a shift ASP to LEAPS, if that's even possible.
So I
Where would
think
those
Kevin
gaps be?
identified where the gaps would be, if you could go back to
Wouldn't be
that.
anything during when leaps are in session.
Okay, so nothing, no gap when LEAPS is in session.
Correct.
Thank you.
I do wanna be mindful of the
Yeah.
hour, it's late,
I'm actually done.
you're good.
I do just want clarification for next time. Are you wanting me to bring back LEAPS attendance by grade level? And more information by town on childcare? Those are two things that kind of stood out to me. Or something else.
I mean, I think what's tough is that we're contending with a challenging decision to make, and so I don't know at what point do we say we have enough data
Right.
Right.
to make the hard call about we keep it and then we have to make other decisions around summer leaps and so on and so forth, or we decide. I don't know what other data, I mean, Emily, you feel like that would be helpful?
With Kevin's point of there would be no gap other than the school vacation, which is the same for all of our towns, we all have, you know, that to contend with. I don't need additional data, so my request for by age is obsolete.
Okay.
And I don't know about the other part, Lynn, was finding out what other childcare options exist in the other towns. I'm not sure what bearing that has
It's
on the
outside the scope
on the
of
decision.
Right.
I mean,
Okay.
anybody can go on the website and Google childcare
Yeah.
providers by town, so.
Okay.
Do you want me to just put it back on the agenda in
Yeah,
November?
I don't think that I don't get the sense, and given the late hour, that we can really make this decision now. But it sounds as though we need to make it somewhat soon.
Would you like Heather to be here for that November conversation to talk about funding for summer?
Sure. And Sharon, thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming. We appreciate your tireless effort in this space of childcare in rural communities. I really understand the struggle.
Well, I guess being in homes and working with young children all those years, going into places that I thought if they could be in a better place, not that the home isn't the best place, but sometimes they need something else.
Of course. Appreciate that. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Sharon.
Sharon.
Okay, so we'll move on to our principal reports. Kevin, do you have anything that you'd like to highlight or
I feel like
add?
I've been here a long time. My 15 minutes went a little over, and I apologize for that. I just get passionate about it. I will say that, a real quick one, our breakfast numbers are awesome. So we went from having 20 to 30 breakfasts last year to 90 to some days over 100. So
Excellent.
I built it into the schedule, and teachers are loving it, and kids are liking it even more, and it's
I
good.
saw lots of happy faces with the breakfast the other day when I was visiting.
Yeah, they don't have to choose between going outdoors and having breakfast. They can do it during the school day.
That's
So,
great. And the research shows that meal is really critically important for learners to have a successful day. That's great.
So, thank you.
I'm glad to hear that. Gavin,
So then, in terms of our STAR data, we did see a nice jump from last year to this year in terms of the number of students testing at or above grade level. Some of that is just we were a lot more deliberate about explicitly teaching test-taking skills during the test as well. And we're going to continue to lean on to that as we use our interims as well. In addition to that, for student-centered learning, we have been able to now fully roll out all of our WIN groups over the course of the month of September. A lot of that had to do with waiting to see what the data informed us as well. we were able to do formal data dives that have been ongoing as well, going into STAR and really playing with the data to look at targeted areas for classroom instruction. And then finally, one of the big pushes has been to roll out with morning meetings and advisory time. Basically, Developmental Designs calls it CPR, which is basically creating a circle, or it's called Circle of Power and Respect. And basically, it's to continue to further explicitly teach SEL skills. Typically, what the framework of these meetings is going to look like is there's going to be the morning news. Sometimes there are ongoing class projects as well that are part of the morning news. Then moving into a morning greeting, and then from there, normally a morning activity, which a lot of times is play-based to just help build camaraderie and once again build interpersonal skills. In terms of upcoming events, one of the things that is very fortunate is that we are also in the process, we're finally at that point in campus culture to launch a youth advisory committee at the middle school level, which is going to help give a voice to middle school students to help shape campus culture. Also, I was very excited at today's all-campus morning meeting. We named our staff member of the month, who was not necessarily thrilled to be paraded up in front of the group and have her picture taken, but Miss Kinney, one of our para-educators, was named as staff member of the month. And then I was also able to formally let the middle school students know that I was officially approving a November 9th dance.
Oh, it's a big deal for middle school.
I can't wait to get out on the dance floor again. I hope this time around I'm not the only one dancing, because it was kind of awkward and sad at points.
Kevin.
Thank you, Gavin. Terry Sue.
Two brief things that weren't on my notes. One of them, we decided we needed to revamp our system improvement teams. So we started over essentially and created something new. Instead of like a culture and climate, we changed it to be called positive school-wide engagement. And we have community members as well on that, not just staff.
Oh, great.
Positive, and then the second team is the PBAS team, which has been in place for a long time and very successful. Again, we have students and parents also involved in that one now too. We have one focused on SEL and restorative practices, and they're looking at trying to attend a conference here that's not on a school day, so that's even better, in the near future, and getting that rolling out in our building a little bit more. And then our one that we called it the academic excellence team. So it'll be focused on our MTSS, PLC process, and also getting academics back to the top of our list of things we do as a school. And we're trying to bring community involvement in on that team too. That one currently doesn't have it, but we know we'll get that. So that's one new thing. And everyone left on Monday after the first set of team meetings, like excited and jazzed up and saying that they felt like we had focus and a goal. Each team has goals now. The first thing from the positive school-wide engagement team is cleaning up the Sheldon Forest and getting that ready to use again, and partnering with the library, Cold Hollow, and the PTO, so we can have story walks starting in mid-November or October, etc. So that's like their first big project that they're doing, partnering with a bunch of different organizations. And the second thing I wanted to bring up is last Friday we had our annual staff versus student football game, which was a blast. And if you happen to see Assistant Principal Sean Stebbins, he has a nice, lovely shiner on his forehead. And unfortunately, though, we did not hold our staff win streak. We tied. But we did not lose, and the students did not win. So it was an okay game. No, everyone had a lot of fun. And even our oldest, well, I guess it's not our second oldest staff member, who is 70, he even played football in the game. So it was very, very fun, and the kids all loved it. So it's one of our favorites.
I saw the pictures and it looked like a blast.
Yes, it was a blast.
Sorry that I missed it
I didn't
this
have the
year.
pictures early enough to get them put into my board notes, so I apologize for that. But it was a blast, and in 2 weeks, I think it's 2 weeks, we have our first annual, we'll see if it's annual, I'm a little nervous, I admit, is our staff versus students soccer game for the end of the soccer season. So we'll see how that goes. That one makes me nervous. Football is flag football, that doesn't make me nervous, but soccer makes me nervous. So we'll see how that one goes.
I predict they're going to have more stamina
What?
I said, I predict they're gonna have more stamina with this than the staff.
Well, the
So
students,
running up and
yeah,
down the
I'm
side
just,
of the
you know, those slide kicks, that's what I'm worried about, you know. The flag football's not as dangerous, this makes me, you know, my mama bird straight kicks it, but it'll be really fun, and the kids are excited and jazzed.
Our insurance company would really like it if you say there's no slide tackling.
Well, that's what I'm going to
Yeah.
say, and I told
No
staff,
headache.
if you
No
play,
slide tackle,
I told
no
staff
headache.
before the football game, and I said it last year, and I'll say it.
Okay, so, we have exited executive session at 9:07. And let's see, any future agenda items? We talked about circling back to the ASP conversation in November. And our next meeting will be November 6th at MES, and hopefully Sandy will be back from her leave and
That's
will
the
be
plan.
joining us, wonderful. Any other questions, discussion from anyone on the board? Okay, appreciate you all. I'll make a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
In the virtual world, we're good?
Aye.
Okay, thank you all so much.
Thanks,
Get home
everyone.
safely. Appreciate it.